So the one thing I haven't been able to test yet on this bike is climbing. So this morning I went out to the Green Mountain Scenic Parkway and parked there. And I'm gonna do this road loop where I just left there, went through a roundabout, went up the wall, went through another roundabout, and now I'm over here on South Buck Hill. I'm gonna hit the Buck Hill rollers, see how it feels on these, and then I'll go ahead and hit some more climbing after this before I head on to back to Green Mountain and do the Lake Apopka gravel trail. So far, climbing and the gear spacing has been really good on this. We'll see how it works through these rollers. And I'll let you know after I'm done. Okay, well now I'm on Turnpike Road. I just made it through the rollers on South Buck Hill. And I gotta say the gearing works pretty good. This one by setup, it must be the size of the front chain ring with the wide ratio rear cassette. You don't get a lot of like big jumps that I was expecting with gear changes. It's pretty smooth, so even when you're going up and down hills, as you're switching gears, it's a pretty smooth transition. No, I didn't find myself where like I was in one gear and I switched to the next gear and all of a sudden I was torquing real hard, or I was in one gear and I switched to the next gear and all of a sudden I was spinning, you know, 50 higher on my cadence than when I was in the previous gear. So they all seemed like a pretty smooth transition as you were shifting. When I went up the wall and on one of the hills on Buck Hill, I did go all the way to the largest chain ring in the rear, the largest cog in the rear. Probably didn't have to. Probably could have stayed in the gear that I was in instead of shifting all the way to the biggest one, but just made it a little bit easier as I reached the top to make it up and over. So that's what I wanted to report there. I'll report a little bit more in a little bit. Okay, I just turned on Sugarloaf Mountain Road, and this is the, I guess, biggest climb, hardest climb anywhere near me in Central Florida. So I've done this a number of times on my road bikes, but this will be a first on this gravel bike, and I want to see how difficult it is to climb this thing with this gravel bike. And I also have my rear rack on the bike and my rear luggage on the top of the rack with some weight in there, so we'll see how much that affects this. But once I make it to the top, I'll give you a report on how it went and how the gear changing worked going up this thing. Okay, I'm getting near the top. I am in the biggest cog on the rear cassette, but I don't feel like I need to shift to an even bigger one. This one feels like it's working just fine. Shifting went good, and I didn't feel any big jumps again. Like I mentioned earlier, when you're shifting from one to the next, even though it's a wide ratio rear cassette, I'm not seeing those big jumps from either having to torque it on the pedals or spinning real fast on the pedals. It just seems pretty steady, so yeah, I'm liking this. This works out well for me. Now we'll see how this thing does on the descent when I go out on the backside of Sugarloaf. See how it compares to my road bike. Sure, it'll be slower, but I want to see how fast this thing will go and what it feels like on the descent doing that. So I'll go ahead and record again later, but right now, yeah, I like this. It's working out well for me. Okay, I'm getting ready to make the descent down Sugarloaf. Yeah, usually on my road bike, I'll get in the low 40s on this one, so like 42, 43. So we'll see what it's like on this gravel bike. One thing I noticed, I was pedaling on the descent. Once I got over 34 miles an hour, then the pedaling wasn't doing anything. I think at that point I'd spun out of gears, and so I think somewhere in that 34, 35 range, at least on that descent, you know, I wasn't gaining anything by pedaling once I hit that point. So now I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna pedal back to Green Mountain. And once I'm there, then I'm gonna go on the Lake Apopka gravel trail, do some gravel riding. And then while I'm riding on the gravel, I'm gonna give you an initial review of this bike, what I think of it, and try and cover as many things as possible while I'm just riding down the gravel trail. So I'll be back later. Okay, I'm out on the Lake Apopka Loop Trail, and the wind's blowing a little bit, so I'm not sure how well the audio is going to work with me riding and the wind blowing. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a place where I can just stop and get off the bike and then do my bike review while I'm parked, rather than do it while I'm riding and the wind blowing. So I'll let this roll for a couple minutes so you can see what the gravel trails look like out here, and then I'll stop the recording and I'll pick it back up when I find some place in shelter where I can record without the wind going. Okay, I'm out at the Lake Apopka Loop Trail, and I just pulled over so I can do a quick review of this Trek Checkpoint SL6 Gen 3 with the SRAM Rival 1x group set that I've got. So I've ridden this enough now that I feel comfortable doing an initial review on it. I've done 2 Century Plus rides on it. I've done a few 30 to 50 mile rides on it, and this is the second time I've taken it out on the gravel at Lake Apopka. All the other rides have either been on roads or rail trails or bike paths on paved roads. So, but if this review seems a little biased, it's because I really like this bike. So even though I haven't probably got more than about 500 miles on it, I'm really liking it. It's doing everything that I want it to do as far as what I want to use it for, and everything's working out really well. So I'll start out first with the tires, the wheels. They come set up tubeless right from the factory, from Trek, and then the dealer will add your initial batch of sealant to it. I initially started running these at 45 psi, and the first ride I went on at that pressure, they felt like they were dancing around a little bit. So then I dropped it down to 42 psi, and that felt a lot better. I ran the 42 psi on both my Century Plus rides and on a couple other 30 to 50 mile rides, and they seem to be working out really well. Today I dropped it down to 40 psi, and that actually seems a little bit better. So I went to a website and plugged in on the tire pressure calculator, plugged in that I was using gravel tires with the tubeless and 700C by 42 and the 25 rim width, and along with the other information they asked for, and it came out and said I should be running 38 psi. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run 40 for right now, and then I'm going to try it at 38 and see what that feels like. But so far I've been out on the road today and been on the gravel today at 40 psi, and that seems to be working really well. As far as the wheels, they roll pretty good. If you're out riding, pedaling along just on flat ground, and you just stop pedaling, you coast for a little bit before you lose your speed. It's not like your speed immediately drops off. This wheels, they will carry some speed for you, so it's do seem like a pretty decent wheel set when it comes to that. The brakes work really well. The only issue I have with the brakes is on the times I've been out where it's been foggy or misty, so there's been moisture in the air, these things squeak really bad. I mean, my Shimano disc brakes on my Trek Madone, they shriek a little bit when they get wet, when it's raining out or when it's misty or foggy, but nothing like these ones. These ones, they're like almost an ear-piercing screech. So I've got to see maybe the pads need to be worn in a little bit more or what, but when it's dry out, yeah, no problems or issues at all with the brakes. They work just fine. The gearing I'm really surprised with. This is my first 1x group set on a bike, and I was kind of concerned with the 1x and the really wide ratio rear cassette, but the shifting is really smooth, and you don't notice a big jump when you shift from one gear to the next as far as your cadence goes. So whether I was on flat ground, on paved roads, gravels, I just took it out on some big hills here for Florida earlier today, and as I was shifting, it was very smooth shifting, and also I wasn't seeing a big change in cadence as far as, like, sometimes when you put a wide ratio rear cassette on a road bike and you shift and it jumps 3 or 4 teeth, you either like go to a super fast spin on your cadence, or all of a sudden you're torquing really hard. Didn't notice this. This was a real smooth transition as you go from one gear to the next, so I'm really happy with the way the gear ratios are on this bike. I saw in some other reviews on previous generations of the Checkpoint, they talked about toe overlap. I have not experienced any toe overlap on this bike. Now when I turn, I primarily turn by leaning my bike, so I'm not really turning the handlebars. I'm either, if I want to turn left, I lean left. I want to turn right, I lean right. But what I did, just to make sure, I got on the bike when I was just stopped, clipped in, put the pedal all the way forward at 3 o'clock, and then turned the front wheel side to side, and I still had clearance between the tire wheel and the tip of my shoe, so there was no contact being made. So at least for me on this size medium Checkpoint, and I wear a size 9 shoe, even with the crank leg all the way forward, I'm not getting any toe overlap. Now one thing I did notice, but I've noticed this on all my other bikes too, because when I get my clips on my shoes, I go with the 6-degree float, is every now and then I'll feel my right rear heel click up against the chainstay. Not a lot, like I'd say maybe on the Century ride, maybe I experienced it 8 or 9 times, so it's not something that's constantly happening. But I do have the 6-degree float because my knees and my ankles aren't in the best of shape, so I like to be able to move them around, and it's just because of that movement, sometimes I'll feel it brush up against the chainstay as I'm pedaling, but it's not happening a lot. And once again, I don't think it's particular to this bike, because it happens on all my other bikes. I think it's more something particular to me and the way my ankle foot moves around with the 6-degree float on the cleats. As far as the comfort on the bike's really comfortable. Even on the 2 Century Plus rides, I did one that was 109.8 miles, and then on the way back on that route, I took a slightly different route as I got closer to my house, so it was only 108 miles. The bike was great comfort wise. I mean, I was on the hoods probably 98% of the time, and those hoods are very comfortable. You know, sometimes I'd get on the top, sometimes I get on the drops, but the majority of the ride I was just on the hoods. Felt like I was in a very comfortable position as I was riding this bike. The saddle, no issues with the saddle. I know the saddles are a personal preference and everybody's saddle, they like it a little bit different, but for me, I've had no issues with like sore spots or the saddle feel uncomfortable. And I've ridden with a couple different sets of bibs, so I got bibs from different companies, and no matter which set of bibs I had on, the saddle felt real comfortable, especially on those Century Plus rides. So yeah, I'm really happy with the saddle. And another thing with the comfort is, I think with the ISO speed combined with how big and thick those front forks are on this bike, and then combined with the wider gravel wheel set, wider tires, and lower air pressure, it rides real comfortable even when you're hitting rough stuff. It seems to displace the energy from the bumps, so you're not feeling it as bad. So like for instance, when I was riding out on the road and there was a rumble strip between the car lane and the shoulder, there were times when there'd be debris in the shoulder and I'd have to move over and I would hit that rumble strip. And if I hit that on my road bike, it would jar the crap out of me. But hitting it on this one, I could feel it, but it wasn't like that same jarring sensation. It was like the bike really absorbed a lot of that hit. And the same thing I noticed like when I'm out here on Lake Apopka and I hit washboards or hit small holes in the trail or just hit bumps in the trail or hit rocks. It seems to absorb and displace that energy from those hits a lot better than what I was expecting. It makes it a lot smoother ride. So that's, you know, I'm very happy with the way things are going with this. It shifts really good. The brakes are good. You know, the thing seems to be working out fine. I haven't had any issues with it as far as any issues or problems with the bike. It seems to be going good. So I'll probably do a long-term review after I get a few thousand miles on this and let you go and update then. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ride a little bit more out on the gravel, and then I'll stop, and at the end of the video I'll go over how I set my packing up as far as for my short rides where I just go for 2 or 3 days and stay overnight or 2 nights in a hotel, as far as how I take everything with me with just what you see on the bike. gators are everywhere around here. It's like 4 in a row I've seen right on this stretch. Just laying out in the sun, basking away. Wonder if the camera picked up any of that or not. Gators are everywhere around here. It's like 4 in a row I've seen right on this stretch. Just laying out in the sun, basking away. Wonder if the camera picked up any of that or not. That's the same one that was here the last time I came by. Yep, there's another alligator out basking in the sun and trying to get warm. Yeah, right at the 6.5 mile mark of the Lake Apopka Trail. There's another one basking in the sun. There's another one just ahead. I think this is where I came through earlier, and there's like 5 of them just laying there in the grass. Got another gator up here on the left. They're all basking out in the sun today. Yep. It's one thing they've got in Lake Apopka is a lot of alligators. I'm coming up near the end of the Lake Apopka Loop Trail, heading back to Green Mountain Scenic Overview where I parked. I think I said earlier I was going to go over what I put in the bags and actually have on the bike. I think I'm going to do that in a separate video rather than bundle it into this one. So by the time I get done today, I'll have just over 50 miles. I did 16 miles initially on the road to get the hill climbs in, and then Lake Apopka Loop was just over 34. So this is going to be a wrap on this. Right there's the scenic overlook that you can climb up to and take a look at the surrounding area from this path.